What's up, Internet? Welcome to Wider Music. I talk about everything from music theory to entertainment law on this channel. But today, I wanted to show you guys how I built this studio desk, which was actually the project that kind of got me into YouTube in the first place, even though it was in a roundabout way. Now, this kind of started when I decided to open a solo law practice a few years ago. Because I figured that I needed a pretty professional looking desk if I was going to be meeting with clients. And the desk that I had used up to that point, it worked, but it was basically a little kid's desk. And then B, I was broke. So I decided that I would spend probably even more money than I would have otherwise, and a whole bunch of time, and build my own desk. I've also really always wanted to set up a nice studio space for recording music, and so I took the opportunity to add some features to this desk that would really, make it ideal for those dual purposes of being a nice, big, good-looking desk for my law office, and also a nice, comfortable spot to do some recording. The only problem was that I had literally zero experience building anything at all, unless you count building stuff out of Legos like 20 years ago. And that's actually when I really, really fell in love with YouTube, because I watched a whole bunch of videos. I found some great, super inspiring YouTubers out there, and I was able to figure out exactly how I wanted to design the desk and exactly how to build it. And I was able to do it all without spending a fortune on tools, which was great because I didn't own any. I literally hadn't owned a hammer, much less owned or even really used any power tools until I started this project, which looking back was like 11 months ago, so just under a year ago, when I actually started building this thing. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I designed and built it. It's nice and big. It's got some cool features for wire management, and it's got these two drawers down here, one for a MIDI keyboard, and then this drawer down here that slides out too, and it's got my digital recording studio and mixer. Um, Honestly, I'm really, really happy with it. Could not be happier with this desk. And maybe watching this will inspire you guys to set up your own studio or office space. If you stick around until the end of the video, I will give you some tips and point you in the direction that I would go if you're thinking about doing anything like that or building anything out of wood, honestly. Funny story though, I actually didn't record myself building any of this desk except for putting the drawers in. But my girlfriend liked the desk so much after I built it that we decided I would build her one too. It was almost exactly the same. So like 90% of the footage is from that build, which was actually the second one that I built. So here's how I built the desk. So the first thing that I did was cut up some 3/4 inch plywood. I decided what dimensions that I wanted each of the two pieces of the top of the desk to be, and then I cut down some 4x8 sheets so that I would have two pieces to glue together for each piece of the top of the desk. So I cut out 4 pieces here in total. Now, all you need to do this really is a circular saw, some rigid foam insulation to make your cuts on, and some type of straight edge. Which the best thing that you're probably going to find for that, short of buying a relatively expensive track saw, is the factory cut edge from another sheet of plywood. So that's what I used here. You just mark out where you want your cut to be and set up that factory edge of the other piece of ply so that you can run the base plate of your saw against it as you make the cut. Basically, I just followed this procedure for each cut, and importantly, I made sure to cut each piece just a little bit bigger than I wanted the final dimensions to be so that I could trim it down later in the process. After making those cuts, I glued the matching pieces together to make the two actual desktop pieces. I wanted the desktop pieces to be 1.5 inches thick. I thought that would look a little bit better, plus it would allow me to attach some things to the bottom of the desk pretty well and not have to worry about any screws or anything poking through the top. Hence the gluing together of the two 3/4 inch pieces of plywood. The main thing I would do differently here is to set the desktop up onto something during the glue up. You still want it to be flat so that it's flat afterwards, but I did have some problems with glue squeeze out. It wasn't a huge deal because I was planning on trimming it down anyway, but if I had set it on a table or workbench just a little bit smaller than the piece I was gluing up, I could have avoided that problem altogether. Now, obviously I didn't use any clamps for this, but this method worked pretty well. I did the exact same thing for the other desktop also. After the glue dried, I trimmed down all of the edges of both pieces of the desktop, and this left all of the edges super smooth and basically gave me two separate 1.5 inch thick pieces of ply for my desktop. With the edges trimmed down, I decided to attach some 1x2 pieces to give it a more finished look. Since 1x2s are actually 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches, this seemed like the easiest option. So I picked out the straightest 1x2s I could find, which actually took quite a while at the big box store. I cut them down to size, and then I drilled and countersunk a few holes in the face of each piece. I did my best to lay out the countersunk holes in a symmetric pattern so that it would look sort of decorative when it was finished. Then I glued and screwed the 1x2s on as trim pieces to trim out the edges of each piece of the desktop. To fill the countersunk holes, I took some sawdust, mixed it with some wood glue, and just pressed that into the holes and let it dry. After that, I rough sanded all the edges down with some 80 grit sandpaper, which took forever. I didn't hit any of the plywood with the sander here. That top layer is super thin and it's really easy to sand right through it, so I'm leaving that for later on purpose. I wanted to drill some larger holes through the top of the desk for wire management also, so I did that next. Here's the 1 1/4 inch Diablo spade bit I used. I'm honestly not sure if this bit sucks or if it was just too much for the battery powered Ryobi drill I bought to handle, but drilling the 5 1 1/4 inch holes was a huge pain. I also drilled 10 3/4 inch holes into the desktop, and those were a piece of cake. Obviously, I'm going a little bit out of order here because you can see a piece of the frame of the desk in the background, and I had actually already put that together at this point. Speaking of the frame of the desk, I rough cut all the plywood down for the frame, but left the length just oversized here. And then I screwed on some 1x3s as trim pieces across what would become the bottom face of the frame. Once those were attached, I cut all of these pieces down to the actual width that I wanted them to be. I probably wouldn't do it this way again. At the time, I thought it was the easiest way to ensure that the trim sat flush against the legs of the desk. Speaking of the legs of the desk, I must have accidentally deleted the footage of this, but I borrowed a miter saw to cut the 8-foot 4x4s that I used for the legs down to length. You could probably get away with using a circular saw to do that, but the blade on the circular saw that I bought wasn't large enough to do it in one pass, and a big benefit of using the miter saw was that I was able to use a stop block and make sure that all of my legs were cut to the exact same length, which was nice. Once the legs and frames were all cut down to size, I used a pocket hole jig to attach the frame pieces to both the legs and the top of the desk. If you're one of those haters out there that thinks using pocket holes doesn't count as real woodworking, I say, hey man, I'm not even a real woodworker. I'm a guitar teacher and an attorney, so hate all you want. I love pocket holes. After drilling all of the holes, I assembled the frame. To do that, I just used a spacer to set the frame pieces where I wanted them in relation to the legs, and then put pocket screws into the pre-drilled holes. Just like the top of the desk, I left the frame in two separate pieces so that it would be more manageable when I went to move it inside.
After getting the two frame pieces assembled, though, I did go ahead and put all four pieces into place just to get a feel for how it looked, and I was super, super happy with it. I pretty much had it where I wanted it with two separate frame pieces and two separate top pieces. The only thing that I needed to do at this point before I brought it inside was do a final sanding and then finish it. So for the sanding, I think I went up to a 120 grit. I definitely could have kept going, but honestly, I thought it was fine after the 120. And I did go up to a 220 grit by hand between coats of lacquer during the finishing process anyway. And I have the top of my desk is super smooth. Based off all the research I did and what I felt like I could afford, the staining process involved putting a coat of mineral spirits over the entire thing to keep the stain from being splotchy. I should note that I did finish each of the four pieces one at a time. But so I tested an inside portion of one of the frames without using the mineral oil, and I definitely think it helped the stain soak in and look more uniform. So for the stain, I used Varathane brand premium fast dry stain. I don't have much to compare it to, but for what it's worth, I thought it worked pretty darn well. On my desk, I used black cherry, and I love it. My girlfriend wanted something darker, so in the video here, I'm actually using the Kona color, and that turned out pretty well also. As a side note, any glue that you don't get off during the glue up or get completely off during the sanding process is absolutely going to show up in your finish. I learned that the hard way when I finished the top of my desk. It did look like all the glue was gone between sanding and staining, but there was still enough there to lighten the stain in spots. For my purposes, it's not a huge deal, but if you try to do this home, just be warned that any excess glue is definitely going to mess up your stain. After the stain was good and dry, I put a few coats of spray lacquer on the desk. I'm mainly worried about the actual top of the desk. This was mainly just to prevent water damage and marks from coffee cups and stuff like that. But the lacquer seriously made a huge, huge difference. It made it real nice. You can get different brands, but it just comes in like a spray paint can. You'll definitely want a respirator that's rated for this kind of thing. And it took probably about a week of the desk sitting in the garage before it stopped off gassing and I was comfortable bringing it inside. Once it was finally inside, it was just a matter of attaching the two frame pieces together and then attaching the frame to the top, all with the pocket screws and the pre-drilled holes. I also used two scrap pieces to connect and give a little support where the two top pieces come together. Uh, there was a pretty long gap between that and the next step, but I finally got around to putting two sliding drawers on the bottom of the desktop. This was part of the original plan. It just took me forever to get around to it. I used pocket holes both to build the drawers and to attach some separate pieces to the actual desktop. And then I used some pretty nice ball bearing drawer slides that I kind of splurged on. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm anything close to qualified to teach you guys how to do this, but I will say that Anna White has an amazing video on installing these type of drawers over on her channel, and that the footage I shot of me doing this is mainly just sweating and cursing, so do with that what you will. Eventually, though, I did manage to get both of the drawers installed just the way I wanted them. One holds my little digital recording studio and mixer, and the other holds a MIDI keyboard that will hopefully soon be upgraded. And I did check to make sure that the drawer dimensions are sufficient to hold the MIDI controller that is on my wish list right now.
What's up, guys? Thank you for hanging out with me today. Honestly, building this desk was an adventure. I literally hadn't even owned a power tool or any tool for that matter up to a year ago when I started designing and building this thing. And not only do I absolutely love this desk, but I'm convinced that it is solid and it's going to last the rest of my life. I also have a pretty badass new skill now. From the tools that I bought to the materials that I used, I learned literally everything about building this desk on YouTube. And that's actually a huge part of why and how I started this channel. YouTube is seriously dope. You can learn anything you want on it. I'm guessing you already know that because you're here. But if you're interested in anything guitar or music related or entertainment law related, check out the rest of my channel. Give me a subscribe and let me know what you think. If you're interested at all in building a desk like this or thinking about getting into woodworking, go and check out Steve Ramsey at Woodworking for Mere Mortals. I've never met him, never communicated with him. All I've done is watch his videos and listen to his podcasts, but I can say 100% I would not have been able to build this desk or any of the projects that I've built since then without the content that he put out. Plus, his channel is just entertaining. He puts out really good content, and you should go check him out for real. I'll also say that after building my desk and then my girlfriend's desk, I've not only purchased some more tools, like a table saw and a router, but I also got commissioned to build another pretty similar desk, which I'm actually almost done with. So there's a chance that I'll have another video out that's pretty similar to this, but showing you how I would have done it with a little bit more firepower. So stay tuned for that. Again, like, subscribe, peace.